G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to World of Warships with Mags, and welcome aboard the Tier 4 carrier Langley. Yes, I've returned to World of Warships. I started playing this during the beta and actually got quite deep into the tech trees. Unfortunately, I was tied up with other projects and was unable to return to it, so my account really hasn't advanced all that much since release. Thankfully, I finally got back into the US carriers. Carriers was a type of gameplay that I actually really enjoyed, as it turned World of Warships from a ship versus ship combat game into a massive strategy game. I really like playing the support role, and that is what carriers are designed to do. Support your fellow ships. Now, the Langley is the first carrier in the US line, and I was rather surprised when I finally got back into it and got it unlocked, because there has been a few changes to the Langley since it was in beta. During the beta, the Langley had 2 aircraft loadouts that you could choose from before you went into battle. The first loadout was a standard loadout of a single fighter squadron, a single dive bomber squadron, and a single torpedo squadron. The second loadout allowed you 1 torpedo squadron, but 2 flights of fighters. This was excellent, as US carriers generally have a stronger fighter force, and were really good for not so much attacking enemy ships, but for shutting down enemy carriers. They really were the anti-carrier of the game. This has been taken away. You now only have the initial loadout of 1 dive bomber, 1 torpedo squadron, and 1 fighter squadron, which really limits what the Langley is capable of doing. It's not particularly good at air superiority anymore. The Japanese carriers generally have better core fighters at the start of the game, so 1 squadron is often just not enough. The dive bomber squadrons are near useless. Unless you get lucky and they happen to set a fire on the enemy ship, they do very little damage overall. The single torpedo squadron is fine. They always have been. The US torpedoes are a little slow, or torpedo bombers are a little slow, but you can work with that. That's not a major issue. The second thing I noticed was the carrier has had some changes itself. Initially, the carrier was very prone to being citadeled. This was during the beta. And this was largely because the Langley wasn't designed as a purpose-built aircraft carrier. It's a converted ship, and as a result it has basically no armour, and this was fine. Keep your Langley out of the line of fire of enemy ships, otherwise you can be citadeled very easily with HE rounds, and the Langley can be destroyed very quickly. This seems to have gone away as well. In my time driving the Langley so far, I haven't been citadeled once in it. What has happened, however, is almost any direct fire shell hitting the Langley will result in a fire. This is worse. When you get citadeled, it does a huge amount of damage, and it destroys your ship. It takes you out of the game. So you can move on to another ship. But when you've been set on fire, and can be set on fire so regularly and so easily, it's the height of frustration. Your fire control system will put out the initial fire, and then you'll be set on fire again. While you're on fire, you are still alive and within the battle, but you are unable to deploy or recover aircraft from the match. So you are useless, and it can take several minutes to finally be killed. So in a word, my initial reaction to the new non-beta Langley was, it's frustration more than anything else. But that doesn't mean you can't work with what you've got. So, I've spotted my first target. It is a cruiser in the northwest corner of the map. I have no other ships, or only 1 other ship up in the area, so I'm trying to provide a little bit of assistance. I'm also trying to bait the enemy fighter squadrons. Now, the enemy carrier is also a Langley, so I know straight away it has the same loadout as mine. We managed to set a fire on the cruiser using the dive bombers, and we bugged them out of the area. The torpedoes are getting ready to drop. The cruiser is performing a tight turn. Trying to get these torpedo bombers into the right spot so I can actually get a torpedo spread on them is rather difficult, surprisingly. A sharp turning action is actually a really good way of avoiding or frustrating a torpedo squadron, making it very difficult for them to get into the right release zone to get a good torpedo spread. But I did manage to get mine out. But it is going to cost me my torpedo squadron. However, in this case, this is actually not too much of a problem. The initial loadout only allows you to deploy 1 of each type at any given time. However, you do have replacement aircraft, so even once that torpedo squadron has been eliminated, I can deploy a second torpedo squadron into the battle. But my captain of this particular Langley has a bonus ability to defensive gunners on aircraft. So while I did lose the squadron, they have done significant damage to the enemy fighter squadron. Now I'm bringing up my own fighter squadron. This damage should make it very easy to wipe out the enemy's fighters, and this is the first and most important thing to do to an enemy carrier. Your ability to deploy your offensive aircraft depends entirely on the strength of the enemy's fighter squadron. If you eliminate their fighter squadrons at the start of the match, you can fly your bombers and your torpedo bombers across the map, almost without fear, only having to worry about ship-based anti-aircraft guns. Now my fighter squadrons are going to do a massive amount of damage here. They're going to completely annihilate the enemy's fighter squadron, and then I'm going to return them to base so they can reload on aircraft. Now, the enemy carrier will be able to deploy another squadron of fighters. However, fighter squadrons have much fewer replacements. The enemy carrier's second fighter deployment is likely only going to be at about half the strength of maximum. By the time my carrier has resupplied my fighter squadron, it will be back at full strength, so I will be able to easily eliminate the second flight of fighters. When that is gone, the enemy carrier no longer has air-to-air capability. This allows my fighters to freely move around the battlefield, eliminating any of their dive bombers and torpedo bombers without interruption. It also allows my dive bombers and torpedo bombers to move around the battlefield without having to worry about being intercepted. Now, I don't claim to be a master of carrier gameplay. It's been some time since I've been back in World of Warships and some time since I've played a carrier. But I did find in the beta, and I still believe now, this is probably the best play to start as a carrier, especially in a one-on-one carrier situation. Try and take air superiority by any means necessary. Once you control the airspace, you can effectively use your carriers to attack whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want, and supply pinpoint support to your forces exactly at the moment they need it, while simultaneously denying your enemy that exact same capability. Now my second torpedo squadron is already up and moving in on its next target. Just making sure I have a good torpedo release position. I'm constantly adjusting it as the ship is turning to try and make sure the maximum number of torpedoes are going to go into the target zone. My goal here has always been pretty simple, to make sure that there is always at least one torpedo of your spread that is going to hit. So again, we're just adjusting around, and now we're on release. Torpedoes are away, and immediately bring the torpedo bombers home. Now at this point, since I pretty much have control over the airspace due to the enemy team just not having enough fighters anymore, I'm not worried about deflecting my aircraft off in another direction. My fighters are on the hunt for their torpedoes and their dive bombers. They'll eliminate them long before they can make my carrier. The enemy team knows where my carrier is anyway at this point. So, 2 torpedo strikes and we have flooding, so that ship is dead one way or another. I'm likely not going to get the kill on that one. The ship is on low health at this point and it is under fire by multiple enemy ships. And there it goes, looks like somebody put a volley into it and has taken it out. Thankfully that really doesn't matter. Your end score in World of Warships isn't based on how many kills you get, it's based on how much damage you do. And I just managed to take around a little over a third of that ship's health. So I'm completely cool with not getting the kill. It stopped the challenge on the sea cap, allows my ships to move out and begin their attacks, and I get the reward for that damage anyway. So I'm bringing my dive bomber squadrons up. We have an exposed ship between the B and the C cap. I can definitely get a clean drop on that one and bail out of the area. Hopefully we'll trigger a fire. I'm also sending my fighter squadrons over to the east side of the map, as the enemy Langley's dive bomber and torpedo bomber squadrons have been detected and they are on an approach at the moment. My dive bomber squadrons have arrived at the Wyoming, so we are now lining them up for a run. I want to hit it right down its long axis. It maximizes the chances of actually triggering a fire on this ship. And in we go. Not a huge amount of direct damage, but we did trigger a fire. Only 2 bombs actually hit the target, but we set off 2 fires on the ship. Now, if the Wyoming's damage control is off cooldown, he will activate it at this point to immediately kill both fires, and that's perfectly fine. It means I'm not going to get a huge amount of damage out of that, but now his damage control is on cooldown, so the next time he starts taking hits, there's literally nothing he can do about it. Now my fighter squadrons arrived at the east side of the map, not fast enough to prevent the drops from the torpedo bombers and the dive bombers, but fast enough to intercept them on the return, which is perfectly fine. They got that torpedo drop, I'll give the enemy Langley that much, but my fighter squadron's going to make sure he's got no torpedo squadrons left to do it again. And as I'm sure you've noticed by now, things here are a little bit mantic. A lot of people seem to think the carriers are just a point and click, very simple gameplay, but there's actually a huge amount of stuff you have to monitor if you're going to play them correctly. So, we were just about to wipe out the enemy's torpedo squadron and their fighters finally arrived, but this is perfectly fine. I'm going to let the last of their torpedo bombers go, no reason to continue pursuit there, and instead wipe out the enemy's fighter squadron. As you can see, it's only on half health when it first arrived, and it is dying rapidly. When this fighter squadron gets destroyed, at this moment, I now have total air superiority. That Langley cannot deploy a 3rd fighter squadron. They are done. And at this point, the kills to deaths for both teams are about the same. However, the enemy team now controls 2 of the cap points. So at this point we need to do something about that. So I'm bringing my torpedo bombers up into the B cap. I have found a target and we're going to deal with that one. I'm also bringing my fighter squadrons back up to the B point as additional scouts at this point. They're still loaded up with half ammunition. There's no reason to send them back for more at this point. If the enemy's torpedo bombers show up again, I would like to have them on station. And they do work really well for spotting enemy ships at the moment. The more ships I can reveal, the more effective my team will be at taking them out. So once again, lining up for a torpedo release. And the drops away and immediately send my torpedo bombers back home. Now, with the damage they've taken, I can only drop 4 torps at once. And this guy doesn't even maneuver. Although, to be fair, it's a Wyoming. It can't maneuver much. 2 torpedo hits in, that's half the Wyoming's health gone. Now, that is the Wyoming that I hit before with the dive bombers, so likely his damage control is still on cooldown. So I need to stack the damage while I can. So in comes my dive bombers. They line up for their drop. Hit the deck and set a fire as well. 2 bomb hits, only 1 fire this time. So the Wyoming's ability to survive that will depend entirely on how much longer there is left on its cooldown before it can activate damage control again. Although even if the damage control does come off cooldown, so much damage has been done, the first one of my ships that runs into it is likely going to kill it. Now as my dive bomber squadron begins to return to the carrier, I bring my fighter squadron down and around, looking to set up an intercept on the enemy's torpedo and dive bomber squadrons. Honestly, the torpedo squadron is my primary concern, and with no fighter squadron to defend it this time, I will be doing my best to make sure that there are no torpedo bombers left on this map except mine once this is done. So we move into intercept. Unfortunately, we were a little slow, not quite fast enough to prevent the torpedo drop. I was actually rather surprised by how many torpedo bombers he had managed to re-put into that squadron. I'm wondering whether or not there is an ability or a flag somewhere that allows your carrier to carry additional fighters. If there is, I probably should look into that. Regardless, I'm just going to leave my fighter squadron tagged to my torpedo squadron, as there is very little need to move it anywhere else at the moment, and just let it slowly chew that torpedo squadron to pieces. However, I'm running into a problem now. An enemy cruiser has managed to slip through the lines and is starting to move in on the Langley. Thankfully, I had moved the Langley up in anticipation of this, but it's a slow ship. I can use the island as cover, I just need to move a little bit further around and give this guy no reason to want to follow me at this point. And luckily, my torpedo squadron was ready to rock and roll. Now I still do need to move because, as I said before, the Langley has an extremely high probability of getting set on fire on a direct hit, so I really need to watch that. In fact, there we go, I got set on fire from those volleys. So quickly blow my damage control to put the fire out and just keep it at flank speed and try and put the island between me and this cruiser. The fish are in the water and the cruiser begins to make a hard left turn. It looks like he's going to manage to dodge all of the torpedoes here. I really didn't think I would actually get anything on target. Then for some reason he just straightens out directly in front of the last one and promptly takes a torpedo right up the arse. So that incapacitates the ship, preventing him from being able to follow me, and also triggers off a flooding, which is likely going to cause him to blow his own damage control. Now, while that will prevent him from taking further damage, I have a bomber squadron coming in as well. Just waiting for the bombers to get into position, and there we go, we've selected the target and adjust to get them down the long axes. Bombers go straight in and drop, and once again we've got a fire set. Now if he blew his damage control on the flooding, he has no way of stopping that fire, so that fire is going to burn until it burns out. Now with the amount of health he has, it's unlikely that that fire is going to be enough to kill him, but it is going to probably drop his health to the point where he will be one-shottable by any ship with a decent volley. Now at this point, ship for ship, we are down 1. The enemy team has 5 over 4 at this point. Until now we're 4 apiece even, but the enemy does still control A and B. However, we still have the vast majority of the points in the match. At this point, I'm resupplying my fighters, bombers, and torpedo bombers, getting everything all set back up again. But at this point, there's no real need to worry. At over 900 points, we are just about to win the match. It's just a matter of time and whether or not I can actually kill anything before the match comes to an end. So I'm immediately sending my torpedo squadron out towards the enemy ship. I'm hoping I can get him fast enough to get a torpedo launch and a kill. Volley comes through and we've lost visual on it, and unfortunately, before my torpedoes could reacquire, that is the end of the match. So, 128,207 credits, 1,616 experience with 81 free experience. We got 6 torpedo target hits, 6 bomb hits. We shot down 19 enemy aircraft, 3 incapacitations, set 5 targets on fire, caused flooding on 4, and defended a base once. 61,571 damage. It's been a while since I've played a carrier. In fact, this is only the 6th battle I've actually played in the Langley since unlocking it, now that the game is live, and I don't think that's too bad. First place on the team with over 1,000 base experience, in fact the highest base experience of anybody else in the match. And so we have the damage report. So, aircraft. For starters, let's look at our bombers. 24 bombs dropped, 6 impacts, 4,455 damage. This is pretty abysmal in damage. This is why I don't like dive bombers all that much. However, that's not all the damage they did. They also set 5 fires, adding another 5,467. So we're looking at about 10,000 damage in the dive bombers alone. That's not great, but it is useful from time to time getting enemy ships to trigger their damage control. Next up we have torpedoes. We had 6 torpedo impacts for 35,063 damage. 15 torpedoes in total were released, but that's not all the damage they did. They did an additional 16,586 damage in 4 flooding events that the torpedoes were also able to trigger. So overall, torpedo bombers, much better value for money. Overall, we only actually hit 4 different ships, but we also wiped out 19 enemy aircraft, and we only sustained 6,897 damage ourselves, all from HE. That is, of course, direct fire damage, and of course we had 1 fire, which only did 469 damage before I triggered the damage control. So anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of this battle. As I said, I'm only newly coming back to World of Warships. I am very rusty. It has been a while since I've played. Let me know what you thought, what improvements you would like to see, and whether or not you'd like to see any more. As you saw in the note on the intro, new intros and outros are being made at the moment for all of my current games, and hopefully they will be up in time for the next video. As always, thank you very much for watching. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll catch you next time.